Hello everyone, and welcome back to my podcast. As you know, I am reading Wings of Fire, The Dragonet Prophecy by T. Sutherland. Today I will be reading Chapter 2 and Chapter 3. So let's get started. Chapter 2. Clay swept the bones of dinner into the river with his tail. The stripped white shapes bounced away in the current. Fires flickered around the edges of the great central cave. Echoing space yawned overhead, dripping with stalactites, like huge teeth. The cave dome was big enough for 6 full-grown dragons to fit across with their wings extended. The underground river flowed along one wall, muttering and gurgling as if it were plotting its own escape. Clay glanced at the 2 small sleeping caves that opened onto the hall, currently empty, and wondered where the other dragonets had gone while he was cleaning up. "Aha!" yelled a voice behind him. Clay threw his wings over his head. "What did I do?" he yelped. "I'm sorry, it was an accident, or if it's an extra cow, Dune said I could have it because Webbs would be out late, but I'm sorry and I can skip dinner tomorrow." A small snout poked his back between his wings. "Calm down, silly," Sonny said. "I wasn't aha-ing you." "Oh." Clay smoothed his crest and twisted around it to look at her. The smallest and last hatched of the dragonets. A pale lizard tail was disappearing into her mouth. She grinned at him. "That was my fierce hunting cry," she said. "Did you like it? Wasn't it scary?" "Well, it was certainly surprising," he said. "Lizards again? What's wrong with cows?" "Bleh, too heavy," she said. "You look all serious." "Just thinking." He was glad Kestrel and Dune couldn't read minds like Nightwing dragons. He hadn't been able to stop thinking about the idea of escape all through dinner. Clay lifted one of his wings, and Sonny nestled in close to him. He could feel the warmth from her golden scales radiating along his side. Sonny was too small and the wrong color, tawny gold instead of sand pale like most sandwings, but she gave off heat like the rest of her tribe. "Dune says we should go and study for an hour before bed," she said. "The others are in the study cave already." Dune, the maimed dragon who taught them survival skills, was a sandwing, and so was Sonny, more or less. There was something not quite right about the little dragonet. Not only were her scales too golden, but her eyes were gray-green instead of a glittering black. Worst of all, her tail curled into an ordinary point like the tails of most dragon tribes, instead of ending with the poisonous barbed that was a sandwing's most dangerous weapon. As Kestrel often said, Sonny was completely harmless. And what good was a harmless dragon? But her egg fit the instructions in the prophecy, so she was their wings of sand, whether the Talons of Peace liked it or not. Of course, there were no wings of rain in the prophecy at all. The dragonets had all heard many times over about how Glory was a last-minute substitute for the broken Skywing egg. Kestrel and Dune called her a mistake and growled at her a lot. Nobody knew whether the prophecy could still happen with a rainwing instead of a skywing, but from what Clay knew of skywings, he was very glad they had Glory instead of another grumpy, fire-breathing Kestrel under the mountain. Besides, if anyone was likely to mess up the prophecy, it was him, not Glory or Sonny. "Come on," Sonny said, flicking him with her tail. He followed her across the central cave. Twisting stone tunnels led off in 4 directions, one to the battle area, one to the guardian's cave, one to the study room, and one to the outside world. The last was blocked with a boulder too big for any of the dragonets to move. Clay stopped and pushed against the rock with his shoulder as he went by. He often tried to open it when the big dragons weren't around. Someday it would move when he did that. Maybe not a lot, but even a tiny shift would let him know he was finally getting close to full grown. He felt big. He was constantly bumping into things and accidentally knocking stuff over with his tail or wings. Not today, he thought ruefully when the boulder didn't budge. Maybe tomorrow. He followed Sonny down the tunnel to the study room. His enormous feet and thick claws thumped and scraped along the stone floor. Even though he'd lived under the mountain his whole life, it still hurt to walk on bare rock. He was constantly stubbing his talons, and they always ached by the end of the day. Tsunami was strutting around the study cave, barking orders. Sonny and Clay sat down by the entrance, folding their wings back. A breath of air drifted down the hole in the roof, far overhead, the only window to the outside in any of the caves. At night, without the distant hint of sunlight, the room felt colder and more hollow. Clay stretched up and sniffed at the darkness that had fallen on the other side of the hole. He thought it smelled like stars. A map of Pyria hung on the wall between the torches. Tsunami and Starflight loved staring at the map, trying to figure out where their hidden cave was. Starflight was pretty sure they were somewhere under the claws of the Clouds Mountains. Skywings preferred to live among the peaks, so anything could happen in the deep caves below without being noticed. All this history is so confusing, Sunny murmured to Clay, swishing her tail back and forth. Why don't the three sides just sit down and talk out an end to the war? That would be great, Clay said. Then we could stop studying it. Sunny giggled. Stop that, Tsunami said bossily, stamping her feet at them. No whispering. Pay attention. I'm assigning parts. This is not proper studying, Starflight pointed out. His black nightwing scales made him nearly invisible in the dark shadows between the torches. He swept a few scrolls between his talons and began to neatly sort them into stacked triangles. Perhaps I should read to everyone instead. Dear moons, anything but that, Glory said from the ledge above him. Maybe later when we're trying to fall asleep. Her long, delicate snout, glowing emerald green with displeasure, rested on her front claws. Ripples of iridescent blue shimmered across her scales, and tonight her tail was a swirl of vibrant purples. If it weren't for Glory, Clay thought, none of them would know how many colors were in the world. He wondered what it must be like in the rainforest, where there was a whole tribe of dragons that beautiful. Shush, Tsunami scolded. Now, obviously, I'd be the best queen, but let's make Sunny the queen since she is a real sandwing. She bustled over and pushed Sunny into the center of the cave. Well, sort of, Glory muttered under her breath. Starflight flicked her with his tail. None of the dragonettes ever talked about why Sunny didn't look like a regular sandwing. Clay's guess was her egg had been taken from the sand too early. Maybe sandwing eggs needed the sun and desert sand to keep them warm until hatching, or else they'd come out half-baked and funny-looking. Although personally, he thought Sunny looked just fine. Tsunami tapped her talons on the cave floor, studying her friends. Clay, you want to play as the scavenger? That's hardly fair, Starflight pointed out. He's twice Sunny's size. A real scavenger would be smaller than her. According to the scroll over here, it says that scavengers that have no scales, no wings, and no tail. And they walk on two legs, which sounds very unstable to me. I bet they fall over all the time. They like treasure nearly as much as dragons do. The scrolls say scavengers attack lone dragons and steal— Oh my gosh, we know, Glory snapped. We were all here for the fascinating lectures about them. Don't make me come down there and bite you, Starflight. I'd like to meet a real scavenger, Clay said. I'd rip off its head and eat it. He pounded his front talons on the stone below him. I bet it would taste better than the mouthfuls of feathers that Kestrel keeps bringing us. Poor hungry Clay, Sunny teased. When we're free, we'll go find a scavenger nest and eat all of them, Tsunami promised, nudging Clay with one wing. Sunny blinked at her. When we're free? Oops. Tsunami and Clay exchanged glances. Sunny was sweet and trusting and absolutely terrible at keeping secrets. I mean, after we fulfilled the prophecy, of course, Tsunami said. Clay, be the scavenger. Here, this can be your claw. She swung her long tail in an arc and smashed a stalagmite loose. Shards of rock flew across the cave, and the other dragonettes ducked. Clay hefted the sharp rock spear in his claws and grinned wickedly at Sunny. Don't actually hurt me, she said nervously. Of course he won't, Tsunami said. We're just acting it out, and the rest of us will be the princesses. I'll be Burn, Glory can be Blister, and Starflight will be Blaze. I had to be a princess last time, too, Starflight observed. I'm not sure I like this game. He stretched his wings, and the scattered silver scales underneath they glittered like stars in the night sky. It's not a game, it's history, Tsunami said. And if we had any other friends, we could play it differently. But there are 3 sand dragon princesses, so you have to be one. So stop complaining. Starflight shrugged and settled back into the shadows, the way he always did when he couldn't win a fight. All right, go ahead, Tsunami said, hopping onto the ledge next to Glory. Sunny said. She eyed Clay warily. Right, here I go. La la la, Queen Oasis of the Sands. I'm so very important and royal and stuff. Tsunami sighed. Glory and Starflight hid their smiles. I've been queen for ages and ages, Sunny went on. She strutted across the cave floor. No one dares challenge me for my throne. I am the strongest Sandwind Queen who ever lived. Don't forget the treasure, Tsunami hissed, pointing at the pile of loose rocks. Oh, right, Sunny said. It's probably because of all my treasure. I have so much treasure because I am such an important queen. She swept the rocks toward her and gathered them between her talons. Did someone say treasure? Clay bellowed, leaping out from behind a large rock formation. Sunny yelped with fright. No, Tsunami called. You're not scared. You're Queen Oasis, the big bad queen of the sand dragons. Right, Sunny said. Rawr! What is this tiny scavenger doing in my kingdom of sand? I am not afraid of tiny scavengers. I shall go out there and eat him in one bite. Glory started giggling so hard she had to lie down and to cover her face with her wings. Even Tsunami was making faces like she was trying not to laugh. Clay swung a stalagmite in a circle. Squeak, 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 he shouted, and other annoying scavenger noises. I'm here to steal treasure away from my magnificent dragon. Not from me, you won't, Sunny said, bristling. She stamped forward, spread her wings, and raised her tail threateningly. Without the poisonous barb other sandwings had, Sunny's tail was not very menacing, but nobody pointed that out. Yah! Clay shouted, lunging forward with his rock claw. Sunny darted out of the way, and they circled each other, feinting and jabbing. This was Clay's favorite part, when Sunny forgot about trying to act queenly and focused on the battle. She was fun to fight. Her small size made it easy for her to dodge and slip under his defenses. But in the end, Queen Oasis had to lose. That was how the story went. Clay drove Sunny back against the wall of the cave and thrusted the fake claw between her neck and her wing, pretending it went right through her heart. Ah! Sunny howled. Impossible! A queen defeated by a lowly scavenger? The kingdom will fall apart. Oh, my treasure, my lovely treasure. She collapsed to the ground and let her wings flop lifelessly on either side of her. Ha-ha! Clay said, and squeak, squeak, the treasure is mine. He scooped up all the rocks and paraded away, lashing his tail proudly. Our turn, Tsunami said, jumping off of the ledge. She hurried over to Sunny, clasped her talons together, and let out a cry of anguish. Oh no, our mother is dead, and the treasure is gone. But worst of all, none of us killed her, so who should be queen now? I was about to challenge her, Glory cried. She flapped her wings dramatically. I would have fought her to the death for the throne. I should be queen. No, I should be queen, Tsunami insisted. I'm the eldest and the biggest, and would have challenged her first. They both turned at Starflight, hidden in the shadows. The black dragon looked as if he were trying to become even more invisible. Come on, Starflight, Tsunami said. Don't be a lazy... She caught herself just before saying rainwing. The teachers said things like that all the time. If you don't study, you're no better than a rainwing. What's the matter? Someone replace your brains with a rainwings? Still sleeping? Anyone would think you were a rainwing. That last one was mostly for Clay. But the dragonettes all knew Glory hated it, no matter how much she pretended she didn't care. It also seemed really unfair. Glory was the only rainwing any of them had ever met, and she studied and trained harder than anyone else. Dragon? Tsunami finished awkwardly with a quick glance at Glory. Starflight, get out here. The Nightwing shuffled forward and looked down at Sunny, who had her eyes scrunched shut. Oh dear, he said. Well, now I should be queen. As the youngest princess, I could have the longest reign. That would be good for the Sandwings. Also, he paused and gave a long, suffering sigh. Also, I am by far the prettiest. Sunny giggled, and Tsunami poked her to keep still. Clay swept his treasure rocks into a pile and sat on them. I should kill you both right now, Glory snarled. You and what army? Tsunami taunted her. Glory stretched her neck up and bared her teeth. That's a great idea. I'll go get an army of Seawings, and then you'll be sorry. You're not the only one who can make alliances, Tsunami said. I'll get the Skywings on my side and the Mudwings. Then we'll see who wins this war. There was a pause. Then both looked at Starflight again. Yeah, he said. You do that, and I'll ally myself with the Icewing Army. Also, by the way, most of the Sandwings want me to be their queen. They do? Sunny said, opening her eyes. Who says? Stop talking, Tsunami said, poking her with one talon. You're dead. There are lots of recent scrolls about it, Starflight explained pompously. Blaze is very popular with her own tribe. So why can't she be queen? Sunny asked, if that's who they want. Because Burn is bigger and scarier and could crush her like a bug if they actually fought claw to claw, Glory chimed in. And Blister, that's me, is smarter than both of them put together. She knew she couldn't kill Burn in a regular duel. It was her idea to involve all the other tribes and turn their Sandwing throne battle into a world war. She's probably waiting for the other two to kill each other. Which one do we want to be queen? Sunny asked. We get to pick, right, when we fulfill the prophecy? None of them, Starflight said gloomily. Blaze is about as smart as a Kunku's sheep. Blister is most likely plotting to become a queen of all the tribes somehow, and if Burn wins, she'll probably keep the war going just for fun. They're all pretty nasty. I guess we'll see what the Talons of Peace decide. The Talons of Peace don't get to decide, Tsunami said, bristling. They only think they're in charge of us. We can still hear them out, Starflight argued. They want what's best for us and Pyria. Easy for you to say, Glory snapped. The ruff around her neck flared orange. You weren't stolen from your home. The Nightwings were pretty eager to hand over your egg, weren't they? Starflight flinched as if she'd burned him. Boring, Clay shouted from his pile of rocks. Stop fighting with each other. Come find me for this treasure instead. No one knows what the scavengers did with the Sand Dragon treasure, Starflight said it in his top-of-the-class voice, turning it away from Glory. Among other things, they stole the Lazulite Dragon, the Gold Sandwing Scepter, and the Eye of Onyx, which has been in the Sandwing treasury for hundreds of years. Clay stamped his feet. Starflight's lectures always made his scales itch. I just want to fight somebody, he said. Somebody who wasn't trying to beat him into a violent rage, preferably. As if the thought had summoned her, Kestrel suddenly loomed in the entrance of the cave. What is going on here? Kestrel's booming voice made all 5 dragonettes jump to attention. Sunny slipped as she tried to scramble to her feet, and Starflight jumped forward to catch her. The enormous red Skywing slithered into the cave, glaring down at them. This doesn't look like studying, she hissed. We're sorry, Sunny stammered. No, we're not. Tsunami shot the Sandwing a glare. We were studying. We were acting out the death of the queen that started the whole war. You mean play acting? Kestrel growled. You are too old for those games. Nor were we ever young enough for games, Glory muttered. It wasn't a game, Tsunami said. It was a different way of learning the history. What's wrong with that? And now you're talking back, Kestrel said. She looked smug, as she always did when Tsunami got in trouble. That means no sleeping in the river tonight. Tsunami scowled. Kestrel tapped the pile of scrolls by the entrance with one claw. The rest of you, learn from the Seawing's mistakes and study the correct way. That's not fair, Clay spoke up as Kestrel turned to go. Even though it made his heart pound. We were all doing the same thing. We should all be punished. Glory shook her head at him, but beside him Sunny nodded. Kestrel stared down at Clay. I know who the ringleader was. Cut off the head and the problem goes away. You're going to cut off Tsunami's head? Sunny squeaked. Glory sighed. It's a metaphor, Featherbrain. Now go to bed, Kestrel said. She turned and swept out of the cave, knocking over Starflight's neat stack of scrolls as she went. Clay nudged Tsunami's dark blue shoulder with his snout. Sorry, we tried. I know, thanks, Tsunami said, brushing her wing against his. Hey, Sunny, would you mind taking those scrolls back to our sleeping cave? The small gold dragon brightened. Sure, I can do that. She hurried to the entrance, gathered the scattered scrolls in her front talons, and whisked out of the cave. I can't stand this much longer, Tsunami said as soon as Sunny was gone. We have to get out of here, and soon. Clay glanced at Glory and Starflight, who didn't look surprised. You talked to them about it? Of course, Tsunami said. I need their help figuring out an escape plan. Clay couldn't help but notice that she hadn't asked him for any escape plan ideas. Even the dragons who liked him thought he was pretty useless. I'm not sure we're ready, Starflight said, wrinkling his forehead. There's so much we haven't learned yet. That's what the teachers want us to think. Tsunami's blue scales shifted as she shook herself from head to tail. But we'll never know until we get out of these horrible caves and see the world for ourselves. What about the prophecy? Clay asked. Shouldn't we wait 2 more years? I don't see why, Glory said. I'm a Tsunami. Destiny is destiny, right? So whatever we do must be the right thing. We don't need a bunch of ancient dragons telling us how to save the world. They're not in the prophecy. When do we tell Sunny? Starflight asked, glancing at the cave's dark opening. Not until last minute, Tsunami said fiercely. You know she can't keep a secret. Starflight, promise you won't say anything to her. I won't, he said. She's not going to like it, though. She thinks everything is great here. Of course she does, Tsunami said. She doesn't care that we get treated like cracked eggs, even though we're supposed to be the key to peace or whatever. She cares, Starflight said defensively. She just doesn't whine about it. Youch, said Glory. Tsunami whirled to glare at Starflight, her gills pulsing. Say that to my face. I am saying it to your face, he said, or was I saying it to your rear end? It's easy to get the two confused. He ducked behind Clay before Tsunami could even bar her teeth at him. Hey, stop. Quit snarling at each other like mini kestrels, Clay said, standing up to keep his bulk between Tsunami and Starflight. Nobody's happy here. Sunny deals with it differently, that's all. But remember what we decided. We 5 stick together or else everything gets worse, right? Starflight hunched his wings forward, muttering. Clay's right, Glory said. The last thing we want is to be like Kestrel or Webbs or Dune. Tsunami hissed for a moment, then shook herself. All right, I know, I'm trying. But this place is slowly killing me, she said. Clay shivered at the fierce look on her face. He would not want to be the dragon standing in her way. As soon as we have a plan, we go, Tsunami said, looking each of them in the eye. Let's see them force our destiny on us when they can't find us anymore. Chapter 3. Suddenly there was a thundering crash from the central cave. Clay heard the entrance boulder slam back into place, and then the rumble of heavy footsteps. From the extra squish flap sound of them, he knew that it was Webbs. Something's happening, Tsunami said. She hurried to the door, her ears twitching, and the spiny ridge along her back standing straight up. We have to go listen. Starflight spread his wings slowly. I'm sure we'll find out what the fuss is in the morning. I don't want to wait that long. Tsunami spun around to jab at his underbelly with her tail, and he tipped it backward with a grunt. Don't be a smoke breather. Let's go. She whirled out of the cave. Clay winced at his sore muscle as his sore muscles sprang into action. He followed Glory to the central cave. Glory's scales were already changing to match the mottled gray and black rocks. In a moment, she'd be nearly impossible to see. Starflight slipped past to join her, and the two of them hurried away toward the tunnel that led to the big dragon's cave. They vanished almost immediately into the shadows. Hidden by their coloring, they'd get as close as they could to eavesdrop. But Clay and Tsunami had an even better shot of hearing everything. If they hurried, Tsunami was already charging across to the river. What about Sunny? Clay called quietly. He could hear the little sandwing rummaging around in her sleep cave, putting scrolls away. "We'll come up with something to tell her later," Tsunami hissed back. Clay felt sorry that Sunny was the only one who didn't know about their spying games. But they learned their lesson about trusting her with secrets years ago. Sunny hadn't meant to tell Dune about the pile of rocks the Dragonets were collecting. Their plan was to build a tower to the sky hole, back when they were too small to fly. They'd only wanted to stick their heads out and look around, but one day Sunny forgot to be careful around Dune, and the next day all the collected rocks were gone from their hiding place. That was the end of the plan. That was the end of that plan, and of Sunny getting to know anything. And of Tsunami disappeared into the river with a nearly soundless splash. The pale green flecks on her dark blue scales shimmered as she swam upriver. Clay dove in after her, wishing he could see in the dark like she could. At least she'd remembered to activate the glow-in-the-dark stripe along her tail. Mudwings couldn't breathe underwater like sea wings, but they could hold their breath for more than an hour. So whenever the Dragonets wanted to spy on their guardians, Clay and Tsunami could use the river to get closer than any of the others. He caught up to the sea wing as she was wriggling through the underwater gap in the cave walls. It made Clay nervous every time, squeezing through such a small space. He wished he hadn't eaten that extra cow at dinner. His claws scrabbled on the rocks, catching in the crevices. There was a brief, terrifying moment as his midsection got stuck. Would he drown? Would he drown here? Would the prophecy be ruined because of an extra cow? Then, with a sudden whoosh of bubbles, he popped it through and shot after Tsunami. Her tail stripe went dark as they swam quietly into the Guardian's cave. The three older dragons hardly paid any attention to the river, except for Webbs, who sometimes slept in the shallows. It would never occur to them that two pairs of dragonite ears might be poking out of the water, listening. Clay drifted to the top. Clay drifted to a stop near the entrance when a Tsunami swam to the far side of the room. That way, at least one of them could hear, no matter where the minders were talking. Tonight, however, Clay was pretty sure everyone could hear everything, including Glory and Starflight in the passageway outside. From the way Kestrel was shouting, it was possible that even the skywings up in the mountains could hear her. Coming here with no warning after 6 years, suddenly he's interested! A jet of fire shot out of her snout and blasted the nearest rock column. Maybe he wants to make sure they're ready to stop the war, Webb suggested. Dune snorted. These Dragonets, he's going to be very disappointed. He eased himself onto a flat boulder, stretching his foreleg stump and mangled wing toward the fire. The big sand dragon never discussed his scars or how he lost his foot. But the Dragonets could guess it from the anger in his voice whenever he talked about the war. The fact that he couldn't fly was probably why he was chosen for underground Dragonet minding duty. He clearly wasn't picked for his warm, nurturing personality. We've done our best, Webb said. The prophecy chose these Dragonets, not us. Does he even know what happened? Kestrel demanded. Does he even know about the broken egg and the rainwing or the defective sandwing? Clay winced. Poor Sunny. He floated closer, keeping his bulky brown length below the surface of the dark water. Through the ripples, he could see the blurred shapes of the large dragons gathered around the fire. Webbs flapped his wings. I'm not sure what he knows or why he cares. The message just said, Marozir is coming. I am supposed to meet him and to bring him here tomorrow. Marozir. That sounded familiar. Clay racked his brain. A dragon from history class? One of the tribe rulers? No, it couldn't be. All the tribes were ruled by queens. I'm not worried about Sunny, Dune said. We followed the prophecy's instructions. It's not our fault she's the way she is. But that rainwing, he's not going to like that. A deep growl rumbled in Kestrel's throat. I don't like it either. I never have. Glory's not that bad, Webbs argued. She's smarter than she wants us to know. You overestimate her because you brought her here, Dune said. She's lazy and worthless like the rest of her tribe. And she's not a Skywing, Kestrel snapped. We're supposed to have a Skywing. Clay wished Glory didn't have to hear all this. The Guardians never hid how they felt about her, and she never acted like she cared. But he wished he could tell her that she was just as important and smart as any Skywing. Well, I never thought Marozir would come look at them, Webb said. After he dropped off Starflight's egg, I assumed we'd never see him again. The Nightwings have nothing to do with the war. So he's a Nightwing, which it means superpowered and mysterious and full of himself. That was all Clay could remember about Nightwings. He found himself actually wishing he could get a lecture from Starflight. The epic wonderfulness of a Nightwing's was the Black Dragonette's favorite topic. Did the Talon say what he wants? Kestrel asked. Well, it's his prophecy, Webb said. I guess he wants us to make sure it'll actually come true. Marozir. Clay felt a jolt run through him, like the stinging shock he sometimes got when Dune whacked him with his barbed tail for not paying attention. Marozir was the Nightwing who had spoken at the Dragonette prophecy 10 years ago. They had learned about him in history, but it was one of the many facts Clay could never remember. Who had delivered the prophecy never seemed as important as who was in the prophecy. But maybe Marozir was more important than Clay had realized. After all, he was coming to see them. Perhaps he would take them out into the world. Perhaps they didn't need to escape after all. Perhaps everything was about to change.